Yes.
Probably most of the gatherings of Christians in the first centuries were in homes. Even if the expected role of the women was to prepare and serve rather than to participate, their part was very important. The persecuted Christians were noticed by their love for one another, a love nurtured in these houses. My guess is that the women actually led in this mutual love. This mutual love expressed itself also in responding to the needs of the larger community. This played a large role in the rapid growth of the faith. My guess is that when it came to the actual feeding of the hungry and visiting the sick, the women played a very large role. One possibility for the future of the gospel in the United States is that alongside of the bureaucratically operated building-centered churches of the past, we return to the house church. This time, the role of women will not be limited to preparing and serving.
Oh my gosh, we're going to let them speak and preach? What a radical idea.
Just as long as they cook and do the dishes.
Oh, geez. All right, so thank you, John. And I don't think we need to read our 12-step program because I think everybody here has heard it before. And poor Matthew the goat, I really do think he has like a headache or something. But at any rate, so let's just sing our opening invocation, and we will sing a prayer to the earth. Our dear, dear mother, really provider, earth be your name. The time has come to honor you, to know and to show our love. You give us each day our daily grain, kissed by the sun and kissed by the rain. Teach us now to find a way, care for you in our work and play. Our dear, dear mother, we provide. Earth be your name. The time has come to honor you, to know you and to show our love. Love, 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 love. Earthlings, this is our call. Love your God with your heart, soul, and mind. For God loves us all. And this is, look at this Matthew. Look what he's just by eating everything in sight. Okay, so we're gonna invite the angels in. Angels, welcome in this sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, we'll be living sanctuary for you. The angel Gabriel from heaven came. His wings white as snow, his eyes are flame. All hail, said he, the holy maiden Mary, most highly favored lady. Okay, everybody unmute. We got to sing really, really loud so all the angels come from all the directions. New York and Claremont, San Diego and Whittier, Salem, Oceanside. All night, all day, angels watching over me, my Lord. All night, all day, angels watching over me. Now I lay me down to sleep. Angels watching over me, my Lord. Pray the Lord my soul I'll
take
take
angels watching
watching
over me.
over me.
Down inside the earth with angels down
Inside
inside
the
Inside
the
the
earth.
earth,
When I
when I
die,
die,
hallelujah,
hallelujah,
by and
by
by,
and by,
I'll
I'll
return
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 to
to
to Mother
Mother
Earth.
Earth.
So, news from the John Cup Echo Farm and the secret. No, Matthew. Okay, so we had our first retreating this week, and
Okay, here you can join.
no, Matthew,
I'm gonna.
and he really does have a bad headache, but he's gonna have his surgery, and it's gonna make him feel lots better. I think.
Who's gonna have surgery?
Matthew has he
Oh, that.
they
Oh,
didn't do his
Yeah.
horns right.
Yeah, yeah.
Do it correctly when he was a
Is
baby,
that the one?
and it's called scurrid. So his horn, one of his horns is growing into his head. I mean, it
I
hasn't
could-
broken the skin.
I could see the whoops.
I think we're gonna have to put poor Matthew away because I think he
Want me
really
to do
doesn't
that?
feel. Yeah, I think he's gotta go. I'm so sorry, Matthew. We're gonna miss you, but he's really out of sorts. Hey, Angela and Tony. So so the news is that Matthew went to the vet, and yes, he's scheduled to have his surgery next Thursday. And then our retreatant came. We had a wonderful time with her. She loved being here. And it was just great. So we hope the rest of you will come. And anything else, Walt, we should share about that?
Well, in order to accommodate her, we put a new door in and created out of an old space a really beautiful kitchen. So there's still more that we're trying to do to improve the property, but that was a big thing.
Yeah. And Lucy gave us a microwave. And not only that, but when you're here, you have to join us in talking to the trees, for they are listening to me. I talk to the stars, they always hear me, and the breeze has the time to stop
Stop then,
and hear what
what
I
I
say.
say.
I talk to them
Come on,
in.
on.
Unmute, please. I can't hear you quacking yet.
Quack, quack,
Oh,
quack.
there you go. We sing with the ducks.
Quack, 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 quack,
They are quacking in song. We
quack,
dance
quack,
and
quack.
song. Teach us love and joy. We pray for sheep and flock. Here on the John Cock Echo Farm. We pray
For them all.
in
love.
Meow.
All right. Okay. Well, that's it for today. Okay. So Tony, would you like to read our scriptures? And we have this is a very typical version of the story of loaves and fishes. I'm sure you all know this story. And so we'll hear the very traditional. This is from the New Revised Standard Version. Would you like to read it, Tony? You'll notice it's a little bit like lacking in anything to do with women being there or anything like that. It's kind of annoying.
Ready now?
Ready?
The Gospel of Luke. The day was drawing to a close, and the 12 came to him and said, "Send the crowd away so that they may go into the surrounding villages and countryside, to lodge and get provisions, for we are here in a deserted place." But he said to them, "You give them something to eat." They said, "We have no more than 5 loaves and 2 fish." unless we are to go and buy food for all these people. For there were about 5,000 men. And he said to his disciples, have them sit down in groups of about 50 each. They did so and had them all sit down. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed, and broke them and gave them to the disciples to set before the crowd. And all ate and were filled, and what was left over was gathered up, 12 baskets of broken pieces.
All right. By everything that I do. Sorry about that. Okay. So, Nancy and Walt and I were at Bible study this last week, and I thought, well, loaves and fishes would be a great scripture, because I've been thinking about these small support groups we're going to start for Confessions of a Disciple of Jesus, and I keep thinking about the food, and one of the main reasons I keep thinking about the food, I have to tell you this first, is that I've told you she's come to church before. Cecilia Ranger is kind of John Cobb's bookend, because she's 90 years old and she really is the most awesome person. She's a PhD, a Catholic nun. She was the dean of Merrillhurst School here in Oregon. She's written many books, and she's just an extraordinary woman. So we were talking about base communities, because I've talked with Lucy about them. Lucy has visited base communities in, I think, Nicaragua, and Cecilia Ranger is visited them all over Latin America and in Mexico. And I said, well, tell me about them. And she said, well, one of the things that was the most memorable to me is the group that I went to in Mexico. They always served Oreo cookies and orange crush soda. I know. And I was thinking about how important it is to have food at gatherings, how it changes. We can have a whole meal, but even having Oreo cookies and orange soda, there's something about sharing it with friends in a circle that makes it sacred. It's a holy communion. Yes. Okay. So I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about food and how would we offer or encourage food for our small support groups that we're going to create. And so at any rate, I rewrote this this story, because it always annoys me when I hear these stories and the women aren't in there. I mean, come on, are you kidding me? Loaves and fishes, you think Jesus, like, they served like thousands of people and the women weren't there helping? Give me a break. Okay, so you see, so we're talking about this, and Walt goes, I don't like raw fish. And I said, what are you talking about? First of all, Jesus was a guy, so he knew how to barbecue, but they don't eat raw fish in Israel, right? That's like in Asia, they do that. Yeah. I've been to the Mediterranean. They have really delicious barbecued fish. I'm sure they cook the fish, right? And so I said, but that's really not the problem with this story, is whether they cook the fish or not. The real problem is that they're talking about preparing all these picnics, but they're not even mentioning the women who probably did most of the work. Okay, so you can imagine, I think it's good John Cobb has left the room. It's been really oh, you're not. Oh.
I was gone briefly.
You're in trouble now, Bonnie.
I'm back.
Okay, well, John Cobb begins his chapter on can women disciples save the church, and he begins this with doing his like the typical kind of brilliant riff on theology, and he just sort of says it really straight so everybody can understand it. So go back and read that again, but it's really brilliant. And I was thinking about the whole issue of I've been obsessed with Mother Mary and goddesses, and I think it really helped me, particularly when I was a single mother and I was trying to be a loving mother, and my own mother wasn't that loving. And I was thinking about this partnership model and how important it is for us women, if we are going to do what John Cobb is suggesting we do, which I think is a good idea. The Dalai Lama has even said that it's going to be Western women that are going to save the world. So I think there's a couple of smart guys on the planet who are encouraging us to get into leadership. And but I was thinking, I can't do this with my old ideas of God, where God is, like the mother or the father, and I'm like the child. Okay, so a partnership model is much, much better to empower women. All right. And Mary Magdalene has been so important to me and many of us women that she was the apostle to the apostle, for heaven's sakes. We know she was at least an apostle. She'd seen the risen Christ. We know that we knew that they were taken out of the scriptures and the stories a million times over. So we are going to have to put them back in if we're going to make these stories relevant. So I was thinking about Mary Magdalene and Jesus as a good model for us to lift up egalitarian, radical, loving community. Okay, so I've just rewritten. Okay. Okay. All right. The day was drawing to a close, and the disciples came to Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and they said, "Send the crowd away, Mary and Jesus, so that they may go to the surrounding villages and countryside to lodge and get provisions, for we are here in a deserted place." Mary Magdalene said to them, "No way. We must welcome them. Give them something to eat. Tell them, Jesus, they're hungry." Okay. "We don't have enough food," Jesus said to Mary Magdalene. "Oh, for heaven's sakes, don't worry about it. You've heard of stone soup, Jesus. We'll just find whatever we need to feed the multitudes." "Not to worry," Mary said to the disciples. "We will always find enough food for everyone. And I've got an idea, Jesus. Why don't we start the experiment with the small support groups? Get everybody together in little groups of 6 to 8 people, and we'll offer them snacks or a whole meal." Jesus said, "Great idea, Mary. Let's use my teaching as a kind of curriculum or course." Oh, Mary said, "Awesome idea, Jesus. I suggest actually that let's start with just the women being with women and the men being with men. And then maybe you and I can together, after we've got that all worked out, we can have co-leaders of a man and a woman, and we'll have men and women together. But I just think we need to start with women together." Jesus said, "I know what you mean, Mary Magdalene, because when there are men in a group, they usually dominate." "I know," she said. "So that's a really good idea. Let's begin segregating them, and then we'll have different kinds of groups later on." "We need to have a group," Mary said, "where people can be free, Jesus, to share all of their most desperate feelings of fear and anger about this inconvenient apocalypse, as well, of course, as the good news of the gospel. Tell them about an ecologic civilization, and that your teaching is about love is stronger than any suffering and death." Well, everyone got really excited, and they began getting together in these small groups. And Mary Magdalene said, "Jesus, what do you think about using John Cobb's latest audiobook, Confessions of a Disciple of Jesus, as a kind of study guide?" Jesus said, "Wow, Mary Magdalene, that is truly an excellent idea." And John Cobb has done such a good job of kind of distilling my teachings in just like a few chapters: love of enemies, loving God and not money, telling the truth, doing unto the least of these. He really synthesizes the whole package. Not only that, he puts in a chapter on Whitehead, who's this physicist who's actually trying to teach about the organic wholeness of God's creation. This John Cobb guy has really got it going on. Mary Magdalene said, "And you know what, Jesus? He shares your initials. You're JC and he's JC." They laughed. Wow, what a guy. Okay, so these groups, Mary says, they're going to have to be a place where everybody's welcome, everybody gets to share, everybody gets to have a safe harbor, and everybody is loved. Yes, and I'll tell them the good news. You know what I heard, Mary? This is going to be translated into 17 or 18 dialects of Hindi and Chinese, Korean, Filipino, and even Spanish. Mary says, "That's fantastic, Jesus. the 153, the number of fish caught in the internet waters of the new age of Aquarius. Well, Jesus and Mary were delighted with their plan. Mary Magdalene offered a prayer of thanksgiving and blessing, especially for the animals and the plants too often left out. And Jesus offered a prayer of confession for the human family, asking God, called by many names, for help. They blessed and broke the orange crush, the Oreos, and all that they had gathered, and they had a wonderful time. Now, all these people that they had gathered, they lived happily ever after in a partnership model, and they were a very loving and welcoming community, and they became communities of communities, and the earth healed and prospered, and there was health and happiness in all life on earth, and all the creatures lived happily ever after. Amen. Okay, so that's my story. And I shared, and I don't need to share with you what I shared today because you've heard it for weeks and months. But just as a synopsis, we're talking about creating small support groups. The best news, I said this, maybe some of you weren't here. They had a talk back after the service, and 6 women signed up to be our first women's small group support group. They're into it. And then what? And we talked about that as Unitarian Universalists, we have this tradition where we can just use many sources, right? This is what we do. Carol Hilton is nodding. Lucy will agree. Brian, right? We can use many sources. Jamie, right? Okay, so we're going to use the sources of consciousness raising groups, like that was the first group that I ever entered when Gloria Steinem wrote The Revolution from Within, and she said 1 page of guidelines how to start a women's consciousness raising group. So I did it and just followed those instructions, and I was with that group of women for years during one of the hardest times of my life. And then we're going to beg, borrow, and steal from 12-step programs. And we're going to look at all the medical and psychological models of support groups, yes? Like women's breast cancer support groups.
Excuse me, are those really ducks out there?
Yes. I don't know what they're all talking about. What's going on, guys? You know? I wonder what it is. You want to go check it out? They have a lot to say. Are they okay? It's very interesting, these animals. You know, the ducks have their own pen and the chickens have their own pen.
A feed bag laying on its side.
Oh, a feed bag laying?
Excited about the fact that
Oh.
there might be one little morsel.
Oh, okay.
Get
But
out of that
the
thing.
ducks recently have been moving into the kitchen, the chicken's bedroom during the day. I don't know what that's about. So at any rate, the sermon was too long and I talked too fast, and I thought nobody would come to the talk back, but a nice group did, and I feel very excited that we actually have, and I have a neighbor here who wants to join it too. And so we're well on our way. And so your question of the chapter, John, can women save the church and Christian discipleship? The answer's got to be yes. And as Ned said the other day in our UU study group, well, I'm really glad to be off the hook, he said. Let you guys worry about it. So no. It's not like that. We need you guys. And I think eventually we might even be able to be in groups with you. But I feel really relieved to just land on this place of let's just start women's groups and men's groups. And they were really excited to read your book, John. And and we were talking already about how, you know, we live here in Salem, And it won't be enough to just share resources of what's really going on in the media. It won't be just enough to share all of a roller coaster of feelings that we have, but we have to go do things. And maybe we could go to the Capitol in Salem and do something together. So Walt was there. It was pretty exciting, wasn't it? Anything else you want to share?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Walt was one of, there were two guys that came, Walt and this other guy. Did you want to share anything else about it?
I think a number of the women who came for different types of ideas about worship, some who believed in God and others who didn't believe in a higher being called God. One was a pagan, one was interested in the earth. Yeah, they were very excited and somewhat angry at different things. Two women who, I didn't know they were partners. They're partners,
Mhm.
those women. Yeah, they had a lot of anger about different political things and not being listened to and not being heard. So this is an opportunity for that.
And are you going to join, aren't you?
This group,
Yeah.
well, this is the first I've heard of it, but it sounds.
Doesn't it
real
sound
interesting.
cool?
It does.
We got another one.
So
Okay.
anyway, I was able to crack a few jokes, which is always my great desire and everything. So when they said to me, Bonnie turned to me and said, Walt, is there anything you wanted to say? And I said, oh yeah, I came here to dominate the group. To keep you ladies in line.
Male dominant.
So that didn't go over well because they thought I was serious. But anyhow.
Okay,
I
Lucy, did
digress.
you want to share anything about all of this? You don't have to, but.
No, it was just good to see you in a UU church doing what you do, and I really appreciated it. And you know, it's different on Zoom. You're kind of isolated from it, but I'm certainly hopeful that it will work out. That's amazing.
And I did experience, like I did spend some time, sort of, what's the word? Explaining why I would have a sermon title with Jesus in the title. So
Yeah.
I could feel that there was that Unitarian Universalism discomfort with that. And so I went into it kind of dreading it, but they were much more receptive, and the UU ministers group has been much more receptive. So that's the good news, John.
It is.
So if the UUs can take it, then
I think that the UUs are reacting against putting Jesus on a pedestal and deifying him and all that kind of thing. But I mean, it's the same thing. By deifying Jesus, we separated ourselves from Jews and Muslims. So it's the Quran has a lot about Jesus, but of course, he's a prophet and a human being. And the Jews have just sort of stayed away. But I think that if Jews will just encounter Jesus as one of their great teachers, they may even decide he's the greatest of their teachers. But whether they do that or not, I think that if you can understand Jesus as a human being like the rest of us, but an extraordinarily wise and insightful and dedicated and committed human being, that the negative prejudice can be overcome.
But I think my sense is that all of these people were very clear that they didn't have any place in their life to share about the desperateness of the world situation.
Well, I think lots of people know that. So I think you're going to have a lot of positive response,
Well,
which doesn't mean you won't get any negative kickbacks along the way.
well, it feels like we're sort of off to the races. So
Yeah.
I hope you don't mind. I volunteered you, John, as leading the men's group that we're gonna have.
Oh, I'm not sure it's a good idea, but
I know. Maybe we could like put a mask on you and
well, I just mean if you are discussing a book with the author,
I know it's not a good idea.
doesn't really.
Not a good idea. But John and Walt did volunteer to start a men's group.
Okay. All right. And
So that's good.
Yeah.
And okay, anybody else want to offer anything about this chapter or about the idea of small support groups or the idea of them being segregated men from women or?
Bonnie, what was the title of your actual title of the sermon this morning that had Jesus in it?
I think it was Confessions of a Disciple of Jesus and support groups or something, not very
I see,
good.
okay. Thank you. And it was did you have a good crowd?
It was pretty good, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that church that well.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Big enough for
How
you.
many people were there? I don't know.
I was sitting in the
100
first row.
people or I don't know. Yeah.
That's, yeah, that's
It's a pretty
good.
big church. Yeah. For
Okay.
UU church, you know.
Congratulations.
I
Okay.
know. I know. Okay, has anybody else read this chapter? We have women here like Claudia and Martha, Nancy, Carol, Lucy, Cynthia, would you like to share anything about this chapter?
Sure, but I can think
All
of
right, all right. Well, I would just like,
How many women in the group right now believe that you are going to be the gender that's going to lead us forward? How many people hear the call? Martha,
it's
how
a
about
good
you?
question.
Do you think women could pull this off?
Hell yeah.
Lucy?
We need you too. You can't get away from us.
Carol?
I heard this expressed in the big Unitarian church in San Francisco in the late 60s or early 70s. And you can take this in many ways, like is the whole responsibility getting dumped on us? Or do we have special untapped skills that we are invited to share? So those are kind of two different ways of looking at it.
Or are we suddenly privileged to be allowed to do what
Yes.
we could have done all
Yes.
along, but
Yes.
didn't have the, open doorway?
Exactly. So it's either, hey, it's all up to you and we're going to go take a nap, or or what we have just said, Cynthia. Yeah.
Right.
Dee, how about you?
The morality police.
Talking to small groups, has anybody heard the concept of the power of 8?
Power bait, no,
Really? You never heard that?
no.
Oh, you should. There's a book called The Power of 8.
Oh, the power
there-
of 8. I thought you
yes.
said the power of bait. Sorry, no, I haven't. No, but I
Isn't
like
that,
the
it's
title.
very interesting.
Great. Thank you, Bill.
I don't think there's a formula, but they came up with 8 as an ideal small group.
Uh-huh. Great.
Well, I have a comment on small
Uh-huh,
groups,
uh-huh.
not on women in
Yeah.
general, but on my refrigerator, there's a little thing from some organization that I can't remember the name of, but it says, never underestimate the power of a small group.
Mm.
Its power is greater than you can, and never underestimate the power of the father. Indeed,
change
it's the
the world.
only thing, yeah, to change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has.
That's right. That's from Margaret Mead. And that needs to be a part of the preamble. And I think we need guidelines, they have they have in AA meetings, where it's a leaderless group, but you have a little box and you can just read the script so anybody can be the leader. And that needs to be right up there, and as Margaret Mead said, don't think a small group of people can't change the world. It's the only thing that ever has. Yeah.
Nancy, how about you? Are you hopeful or are you a denier?
I had something in mind before to say, and now I forgot it. So, I think if we have courage, we can do what needs to be done.
I said, when Walt and I were driving home, I said, I have to confess, Walt, because of everybody in that group, I really enjoyed talking to you and John, the man, the best. And I felt really guilty about that. And I feel really guilty a lot of places that I go that I like a lot of the men better than the women. But then when I get together with the women, when men aren't around, I don't feel that way. And he said, well, I know what you mean. Women are just like, what did you say? You said they're just, they just always want to tell you what to do, but they don't. And I go, what are you talking about? Men are always telling me and all the women what to do. And he goes, yes, but at least they just do it outright. They're not just doing it like and pretending that they're not. I thought that was so interesting. I don't want to get into gender,
Yeah. Well,
bashing or gender, oversimplifying it, because obviously there are many men that are very good at being a good host and a hostess and encouraging that everyone gets a voice. And there's a lot of women that are not good at that. So it's not just about, but there does seem to be a cellular kind of experience for thousands of years of making the invitation for families to gather around tables, for people in religious communities to gather around tables, for people in neighborhoods to gather around and to share what we have and to create a safe harbor where people can be together. And I'm convinced that the worst part of the breakdown of everything and the tears of from nuclear war to, the extinction of species and on and on and on is the loneliness and our pain. And we can tolerate anything if we're not all alone. So if we can promise to a small group of people, and it's true of women who have breast cancer, some of them die, but their quality of life and their sense of relatedness, their sense of having expressed themselves, having had purpose to be, in mutual relationship of give and take and love and closeness with others, enables them to die with some dignity. So this is how I want to die. I want to die having a whole lot of really best friends as women. And maybe this is going to make up for my wounds with my own mother and my own sisters. But I've experienced that with women, where we can come together and we can really promise to take care of each other. And so I'm ready to go. Yes, Lucy.
I just want to add that we're just discovering now that there are groups of animals that are talking to each other and plants talking to each other under the ground. And they've done that for years.
For centuries.
And we are not part of that conversation as much as maybe they'll talk to us too now.
Yes, well, if they just come to the secret prayer garden, they can sit and talk to the trees. And, it is so powerful, all of this new kind of scientific research to teach us what I'm sure indigenous people all knew, that, the mother trees, for example, even when they're dying, are taking care of their own as well as people, trees of other species. They have this intimate kind of conversation going on underground. So as Susan Smart says, we don't have to save the trees have to save us. We have to do these circles like trees. Maybe that should be the name of them, the mother tree circles or something. Okay,
I
John.
think
you
that's
have
what the
the last
ducks
word.
were,
I'm sorry?
I think the ducks were talking about forming their own group.
Yes.
They definitely need to get away from El Jefe, the masculine duck, the male duck. I'm telling you. They have, I've told you, every morning he waterboards them and it's like horrible. It's just,
I think the reason that I have practical hopes for women helping greatly is that, you know, I'm from Georgia and I was in Georgia during the period of the end of segregation and, you know, the coming of integration. And it was a dangerous time. And the men were not prepared for it. The women were prepared for it. No. And this was partly because the women had the time to read and had studied, whereas the men had not. But it was the public illustration was so interesting. One day, some of the men in a very macho way said, if you integrate these restaurants, we're not going to go. The women said, we will. So I experienced a very serious public, you know, major event in which the women did give the lead. And it really saved us, I think. I mean, I think Georgia got through the transition remarkably well. There weren't riots or violence. And I don't mean that everything is wonderful, but, you know, it is remarkable that now there are 2 people running for Senate and they're both Black. That's very different from the way things used to be. So there's a real change. It's not superficial, which doesn't mean there's not a lot wrong. I hope you're not saying that I'm holding up Georgia as an ideal example, but it's over one hurdle that might have been utterly destructive. So when I talk about the leadership that women can give, I've seen it, experienced it, very grateful for.
Are you talking about Georgia in the 50s?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I left soon after that and came to California, but the first integration of the schools and integrate, you know, all of that took place while I was there.
I'm wondering if, like North Carolina, Charlotte area, Atlanta had already started to attract a different mix of people that helped in that, and that they were from all over. They weren't just native.
Well, I think that's true, but I may have said this to you before. I may have written it, doesn't matter. I was invited by the Women's Society of Christian Service of the United Methodist Church to speak in each of the 10 districts of North Georgia. And they had been on the subject of integration. And the women I spoke to had studied and they were ready. And it wasn't just Atlanta. I mean, Atlanta is an important part of North Georgia, but there's a lot more of North Georgia. So I wouldn't, and Atlanta has been, the cities, the major cities in the South have, of course, welcomed people from different countries and so forth to a much greater extent. But Atlanta had, almost everybody in Atlanta was either Black or white. I'll put it that way. There were not many. When I was in Georgia, it was really amusing that they were so confused when we had Oriental visitors. They would end up welcoming them to church so that they were honorary whites while they were
Oh, dear.
Anyway, I'm glad a lot of things have gone away. I'm not saying that the racial situation in this country is wonderful. In some ways, the Black ghettos were a lot better than the Black ghettos are now, because they had wonderful leadership. The pastors in the Black churches were better than the pastors in the white churches. The school teachers in the ghettos, they weren't paid well, but teaching school was the best job a woman could get.
On Henry Louis Gates' program that's on PBS on Tuesday nights at 9 o'clock, Lifting the Veil. The question is raised, were things better at times before integration because of the very, very strong support systems among Black people?
Yeah. They had a better support system for the people who are not making it in the middle class.
Interesting, John. Thank you.
But that's a different topic. I just wanted to focus
Right.
on the way the women just, made a public announcement. Okay, if the men didn't want to come to dinner, okay, but they were going. And the women, the men did not make any response. They just shut up.
Would you call these women, pardon me if I push you on this subject, if you're all getting tired of it, yell at me.
Well,
But,
we only have 6 minutes before
Oh.
John has to go to dinner.
oh,
And so we have to pray before he leaves.
Yeah,
But
all right.
finish what you're going to say, but then we do have to underlay into the prayer time.
thank you, Bonnie, for letting me ramble on.
Of course, go ahead.
No, I'm not rambling.
Okay, so I think the thing that I feel the best about John is that I really think that these women are going to have to do this women together. And it took me sort of a long time to get there. But what do you think, ladies? Don't you think there's power in that?
Yes.
Lucy, Carol, Claudia,
Yes.
yes, Nancy, Martha, Edie, there's something about that. Well, let's sing the Beatitudes according to Bonnie, which is walk forth confessing your self-centeredness, you will be able to connect to the larger heart and mind of God. Walk forth, you who mourn for a loved one who dies. God enables your loved one to reach back to love you from the other side. Walk forth, you who are gentle, for you have tamed your compulsions. Walk forth and plug your heart into God's heart, and God's heart loves you as you love and co-create with God. Walk forth, you who are merciful, for it is in giving that we receive. Walk forth in Idiaya, not being celibate, but following Jesus with your heart and mind in single purpose. Walk forth, you who are peacemakers, for you will be called children of God. Walk forth, you who are persecuted, for you are invited to be brave and live in freedom. Walk forth, knowing God is within you, and in the smallest mustard seed, and in the vastness of the galaxies. Walk forth, loving your enemy, and practice forgiveness 70 times 7 times. Walk forth, giving up greed and materialism, and devote your life to care for the least of these. Walk forth, knowing that God loves you. There's nothing you can do about it. And God is calling you to love and care for our common home, Mother Earth. And we say, may we say prayers of confession. Dear Holy One, you who we call by many names, We come to ask for your help. May we women say yes to your call, save the church and discipleship for your hurting world. May we look to Mary Magdalene and women of history that have worked in partnership for an egalitarian revolutions of love. Please give us the courage and strength to learn and share the truth of the inconvenient apocalypse. We come in prayer, terrified of ecologic catastrophe and nuclear war, and sometimes we sink into rage, paralysis, and despair. Many truths are too painful to face alone, and we ask you, God, to help and bless us, guide us as we create loving communities in the spirit of the early house churches, small support groups, safe harbors, to share our feelings, to tell the truth and give and receive love and support during this time of planetary crisis. May we work with one another in mutuality and partnership, and may we never give up. We hear the cries of suffering from war and ecologic catastrophe, and we pray to be in communion with all our relations, including the plants and animals. We hold fast to our vision of an ecologic civilization. May we create circles of love and hope and teach and preach the good news that love is stronger than any suffering and even death. Please help us. Amen. And may we join in a silent prayer for Mother Earth.
Eternal listener, give heed to your people. You who dwell amidst the angels, shine forth into the heart of all nations. Enliven your people with compassion, that peace and justice might flourish. Restore us, O Holy One. Let your face shine upon us. Teach us to love. Amen.
And please lift up prayers for any loved one or anyone here in creation.
Prayer for Angela and her family as they mourn the loss of the matriarch, Leova.
Prayers for Sam North.
Praise of gratitude for Tomas Flores for his continued growth and understanding in life.
Please unmute and let us say in unison, Our Mother, Father God, who is within us. We
Celebrate your many names.
Celebrate your many names.
Your wisdom come. Your will be done.
Unfolding from the
from the
depths
depths
within us.
within us.
Each
Every
day, give us
day you
all
give us
that
all
we
that
need.
we need.
You remind us of our
Remind us
limits.
of our limits.
We let
go.
Let go.
You support us
in our power
and
We
act
act with courage. For you are the
the
dwelling
dwelling
place
place
within us. Empowerment
empowerment
around
around
us,
us,
and the
and the
celebration
celebration
among
among
us.
us.
now
Now
forever.
and forever.
Amen.
Amen.
May the blessing of God go before you. May her grace and peace abound. Spirit live within you. May her love wrap you round. May her blessing of love remain with you always. May you walk on holy
Holy ground.